Right now on Ana Cabrera reports, crying shame. VP Harris slams Trump for comments on Haitian migrants as conspiracy theories and intense rhetoric loom large on the campaign trail. Plus, the Fed poised to make the first interest rate cut since 2020, how it could impact everything from credit cards to car loans to mortgages. Also ahead, U.S. intel officials now say Israel was behind that series of pager explosions targeting Hezbollah. How the audacious attack was pulled off. And later, Sean Diddy Combs behind bars this morning. What's next for the disgraced music mogul as he sits in a New York City jail awaiting trial? Good morning. It is just about 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific. I'm Ana Cabrera reporting from New York. And right now on the campaign trail, intense rhetoric is in the spotlight. The candidates navigating the effects of the apparent second assassination attempt against Donald Trump and the false far-right conspiracy theory pushed by Trump that's ratcheting tensions in an Ohio city. Vice President Harris now slamming Trump for those attacks on Haitian migrants.
It's a crying shame. I mean, my heart breaks for this community. You cannot be entrusted with standing behind the seal of the President of the United States of America, engaging in that hateful rhetoric. This is exhausting, and it's harmful, and it's hateful, and grounded in some age-old stuff that we should not have the tolerance for. So let's turn the page and chart a new way forward and say, you can't have that microphone again.
Let's bring in NBC's Dasha Burns and Mike Memoli, who are following the candidates, as well as MSNBC's political analyst Susan Del Percio and Basil Smikle. Dasha, Trump is in Long Island today, this event under heavy security, and he commented about the apparent assassination attempt at yesterday's event.
Yeah, Anna, let's start with the first part there. Long Island. He's campaigning in New York State, which, of course, is not really a battleground. It's got some folks scratching their heads. But I'll tell you that that part of New York, Long Island, there has been sort of a ramp up of Trump support there. And there are some congressional races, down ballot races, that could potentially help determine control of the House. So that's one of the reasons he's heading there, to boost those down ballot candidates and to highlight some of the challenges going on in his home state. But yes, he did talk about that second apparent assassination attempt yesterday in Michigan, which is a battleground. He made a little bit of light of the experience. Take a listen.
I'm telling you right now, I'm putting a 200% tariff on, which means they're unsellable. Unsellable in the United States. And then you wonder why it gets shot at, right? You know, only consequential presidents get shot at.
He also did recount those moments of hearing the gunshots and thanked the Secret Service. He also thanked President Biden and Vice President Harris for calling him in the aftermath of that incident, saying they were very nice phone calls, Anna.
Mike, yesterday, Vice President Harris was at a National Association of Black Journalists panel, the same group Trump was addressing when he questioned the vice president's race a few weeks ago. And as we heard at the top, Trump's racialized rhetoric was again a focus on that stage. But she also shared details about her call with Trump.
That's right, Anna. This is all part of what we're hearing across the board from top Democratic officials about the need to lower the political temperature. You've heard that from President Biden, condemning this latest attempted assassination, calling for more resources to protect President Trump. You heard this yesterday on the campaign trail as well from Tim Walz, the running mate of Kamala Harris, saying we know that we solve our differences at the ballot box, not through political violence. But the vice president, the person on the ballot against Donald Trump, making that gesture to call her rival to express her concern and relief that he is safe. Harris talked a little bit more about that conversation yesterday. Listen here.
I checked on him to see if he was okay. Yeah. And I told him what I have said publicly. There is no place for political violence in our country.
Now, as we see the conversation about migration continuing to be a focus, we will hear from Vice President Harris in just a little over 2 hours from now as she speaks to the Congressional Hispanic Caucus here in Washington. Her campaign this morning also out with a new TV ad on one of the most powerful issues motivating Democratic voters, in particular this issue, that is abortion, talking about the story of a Kentucky woman who was raped and had to have an abortion at the age of 12 because of an incest situation. This is an ad that is narrated by Billie Eilish, who also just endorsed Kamala Harris's campaign.
Mike Memoli, Dasha Burns, thank you both for the reporting. So Trump coming to Long Island today, Susan. We are less than 50 days till the election. New York is solidly blue. What do you make of the fact he's coming here, and could it potentially backfire when it comes to those close House races?
Well, actually, I think where he is on Long Island today will be helpful to the congressional candidates out there. But I think also sometimes when you run campaigns, you put your candidate in safe places and you let them kind of feel the love from the audience, which he will feel there. So it's not a big leap for him to do that. He doesn't have to travel much. Maybe he's tired and worn down from everything. He just wanted to, hop over to Long Island, nice and convenient for him. But this is not something someone who's seeking to win a race does at this stage.
Yeah, I would expect he would be in battleground states.
You would think so.
He was in Michigan last night. Basil, we've discussed how the vice president has been trying to thread this needle as she navigates the conversation around race and how Trump has weaponized it in this election. I'm just curious, as you heard what we listened to at the top there, how do you think she handled the question specific to the conspiracy theories about Haitian migrants?
Well, let's talk about Long Island again, right? Because even though New York has only voted for a Republican 6 times since the Great Depression, 2 years ago, when Lee Zeldin, a member of Congress from Long Island, was running for governor, he talked a lot about violence connected to immigrants and migrants. He talked a lot about crime, and that really did turn out a lot of votes on Long Island. So to Susan's point, it's interesting that he's there, and I guess that it makes him feel more comfortable, but there is a policy, it is rooted in policy that's come out from a lot of the elected officials that live there that have talked about this issue of immigration and migrants and connected it to crime. And when we look at what Donald Trump has said from his mouth, and J.D. Vance has confirmed in terms of, doubling down, I should say, on his belief about what Haitian migrants are doing, all that does, in my view, is turn out votes on the other side. You're angering a community that may have been mobilized against you before, but now have a lot more reason to come out and vote against you. And this is not just the Haitian community, it's the Caribbean community, which I'm a part of. It's doubling down on this hate, and you have to ask yourself why. And I said this before on the show, why are they so fascinated with pets? Why do they keep talking about this? But clearly they think it's gonna work.
And Trump is saying he's going to visit Springfield, Ohio, the city at the center of this latest conspiracy theory. Would a visit by Trump benefit anyone?
No, it would be devastating to the town. First of all, resources-wise, I think we heard the mayor say that the town could not absorb him coming in as far as security goes because they have so many other issues. Right now, because of the horrible language being used by J.D. Vance and Donald Trump. So I think he does it like he does a publicity stunt, and it should come at no surprise. He cares not one iota about the people there and what his visit will do and inflame the situation. I heard one bit of good news about the community, though, and that was that a lot of people of every background were visiting Haitian businesses to show their support. And that's what the community is about there. They don't need the hatred coming in from Donald Trump.
Right, we heard from the mayor there say, we don't need hate, we need help.
Right.
Yeah.
They do need more resources to help
and that's a
deal
legitimate
with the influx
conversation.
of people who've come to their city. Right. I have to show this Atlanta Journal-Constitution poll out of Georgia, Basil. That is obviously a very key state in this election, and it does show that it's a toss-up right now. But this is the part that stood out to me. Look at that undecided voters number on the bottom. Yeah. Black voters, 12% say they are undecided. in Georgia. Does that surprise you?
Well, you know, when I think about that and layer on top of that the NAACP poll that talked about how there were a number of African-American voters, particularly men over the age of 50, that were either undecided or maybe even leaning towards Trump, and Governor Westmore of Maryland talked about this, that there's still a lot of work to be done to talk to a lot of African-American voters about specifically what Democrats are going to do for them in a Democratic administration. And it's an age-old issue. You've got to go and talk to the voters where they are. But at the same time, when you, just as a black male, when I see someone like Donald Trump, who is remarkably unqualified, standing next to Kamala Harris, who is extraordinarily qualified to be in that position, and they're given equal weight and equal time. That says a lot to me, someone who has to work twice as hard to be in the same room, right? And the message that you send to a lot of black voters is no matter what you've done, it's still not going to be carry, it won't carry the same weight. And that's something that tamps down and depresses enthusiasm to go out and vote, because does your vote actually matter? And so that, I think, is what's reflected there.
That's what I was going to ask you. Is it more like enthusiasm, or is it more that they're really undecided?
A little of both, and right, and I think that's where the challenge is for Democrats to be able to go into those communities and say, this is what's on the agenda for you. It's a specific conversation that needs to take place.
And there are so many different constituencies and voting groups that are important in this election. We talk about people of color, we talk about suburban women, and on that last point, in Michigan last night, Trump's former White House press secretary, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who's the current governor of Arkansas, was along his side, and she appeared to take a swipe at the vice president for not having kids. Let's listen to this.
Not only do my kids serve as a permanent reminder of what's important, they also keep me humble. So my kids keep me humble. Unfortunately, Kamala Harris doesn't have anything keeping her humble.
And of course, she doesn't have biological kids, but she does have stepchildren. And Kirsten Emhoff, the ex-wife of second gentleman Doug Emhoff, took to Vice President Harris's defense, posting this: Kamala Harris has spent her entire career working for the people, all families. That keeps you pretty humble. Susan, why is the GOP continuing to go down this road? Doesn't it risk alienating a whole lot of women voters?
I think it does. I think it's a huge mistake that they're doing this. Sarah Huckabee Sanders should know better, given her political background. But I also think they do it to create more of she's not like us kind of attitude. And we've talked about this a lot. To really say, you know, she just doesn't come off the same way we do. She doesn't have the same values I think they're trying to throw out there, whereas Harris is putting out a whole campaign based on her values. So I think it's going to definitely have backlash against the campaign. But again, I just wonder if they're looking for that, like, little group of voters or people who have never really voted before to come out and vote under such a bad message.
Interesting. Susan Del Percio, Basil Smikle, guys, thank you. We're back with some breaking economic news this morning. The Federal Reserve expected to announce a big interest rate cut this afternoon, the first since 2020, and after repeatedly increasing rates since the onset of the COVID pandemic. The big question is, how much of a cut? NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Romans joins us from the Big Board. What are we expecting this afternoon?
You know, 25 basis points or maybe half a point. You know, there's a lot of controversy and discussion about what will happen. Let's talk about how we got here. Remember when inflation was up there at 9%? Well, you had interest rates near zero. So now the Fed, after inflation has been coming down, has this moment when it can start to lower those interest rates. And what's super interesting about this, too, is you look at the unemployment rate, still quite low, but has ticked up a little bit here. So there's some concern that the labor market is softening. Interest rates have been too high on it for too long, and the Fed's got to start moving.
Are rates falling ahead of the decision? And with that in mind, how can people prepare?
You know, rates have been falling. When you look at mortgage rates, for example, mortgage rates have already been falling here. They're down about 2 points from where they were just last year. But look at where we were in 2020 with rates. You had a home loan at 3.5%, car loans at 5.2%, credit card at 15%. And then after all those interest rate increases, look how high all of these got. The hope is that mortgage rates will start to come down, and generally slowly but surely these other rates will start to come down and give some relief to American families. A lot depends on what the Fed chief has to say, Anna, by the way, after they announce what they're doing, because this is probably the first of what could be a series of rate cuts.
Okay, that sounds like good news. Thank you, Christine Romans. We know you'll listen closely and keep us posted and help us make sense of what the decision is. I want to bring in Justin Wolfers now. He's the professor of economics and public policy at University of Michigan. Professor, it's always nice to see you. Practically speaking, how will this rate cut translate to people's finances in the immediate and then the long term?
Yeah, so, the good news is we've had high interest rates for quite a while, trying to whack that inflation out of the system. The inflation's gone, and what that means is that the high rates can go away. Today, there's a debate, 25 basis points or 50 basis points. I think that's not the big deal. The big deal is that by spring, interest rates should be all the way back down to normal, down from about 5.5% to about 3%. So from a practical level, if you're looking at your mortgage rates and trying to decide whether it's a good time to buy, if you're thinking about buying a car, if you're just worried about how much money you've got left at the end of the week after you've paid off your mortgage, well, all those things are about to get a whole lot easier. Doesn't depend so much on what happens today at 2 o'clock, but really just the run of what's going to happen over the next few months.
I think to the average person, the economy's been sending some mixed signals lately, right? The unemployment rate remains historically low, but it has been ticking up. Spending has been steady, but not in all sectors. Could this cut impact any of that?
I think it's going to help. So the number one problem facing the US economy for the last couple of years has been high inflation. How do you get rid of high inflation? High interest rates, whack it. It slows down the economy, but it gets rid of that inflation, and we've succeeded at doing that. The economy's sending mixed signals, but they're a special kind of mixed. They're boring. Basically, our economic lives have been far too tumultuous since the pandemic. We shut down the economy. We tried to reopen it. There were supply chain snarls. Too many things were happening. And now things are just getting back to gloriously, splendidly normal.
Normal, splendid. I like that. I'm going to channel that. This is splendid to have just normal existence. The perspective, though, I want to point out here and try to understand more how quickly we can see that normalcy. Pre-pandemic, we saw rates around 1.75%. Now we're at 5.5% as far as those Fed rates. Do you expect, like we heard from Christine, that today's decision is going to be the first of several cuts? And how quickly will we get back to pre-pandemic rates anytime soon?
Right. So let's talk about where we are and where normal is. On the job market, we're all the way back to normal and, in fact, a little bit better. On inflation, we're all the way back to normal. It might take a little while before we all start to realize that and acknowledge it. And interest rates, today, we're just taking the first step back to normal. Look, there's a big debate among economists about what's normal. Is it interest rates of 2% or is it 3%? Whatever it is, it's a lot lower than where we're at right now. So the graph you're showing right now, look for that to start to step down, not only this afternoon, but for just about every Fed meeting for the next few months. And I reckon by the spring, we'll be down to interest rates of about 3%. And after that, that's when we'll start to face the harder debates about how much lower they can go and still be consistent with an economy that's splendidly normal.
Justin Wolfers, thank you very much for bringing us your expertise. This morning, music mogul Sean Diddy Combs remains in a New York City jail. A judge ordering him to stay behind bars before he goes on trial for federal sex trafficking charges that were unsealed just yesterday. Star and his inner circle accused of abusing and trafficking women in a criminal enterprise that prosecutors say spanned decades. In just a few hours, Combs will be back in court appealing the judge's decision to deny him bail. And NBC News entertainment correspondent Chloe Melas joins us now. You've been digging in this story for months, really. Bring us the latest.
I was in that courtroom just a few feet away from Sean Combs as the judge denied him bail. And his team was offering up $50 million in order for him to be released, but the judge didn't go for it. We do have to warn you that some of the details in this report are disturbing.
Federal prosecutors say hip-hop mogul Sean Diddy Combs used his power and business empire to carry out a long and shocking list of crimes for years, from sex trafficking and forced labor to kidnapping, bribery, and obstruction of justice.
Between at least 2008 and the present, Combs abused, threatened, and coerced victims to fulfill his sexual desires, protect his reputation, and conceal his conduct.
Combs greeting fans in New York a day before his arrest and 6 months after federal authorities raided his homes in LA and Miami. In a 14-page indictment, prosecutors say agents found multiple firearms during those raids, including 3 defaced AR-15 rifles. They also uncovered videos of elaborately produced sex performances with multiple victims that Combs allegedly referred to as freak-offs.
The freak-offs sometimes lasted days at a time, involved multiple commercial sex workers, and often involved a variety of narcotics, which Combs distributed to the victims to keep them obedient and compliant.
While searching Combs's residences in March, according to the indictment, law enforcement seized narcotics and more than 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lubricant. Combs has pleaded not guilty to all of the charges. Overnight, his attorney saying he doesn't believe Combs will take a plea deal.
I do not see it happening. He's innocent, and he is going to go to trial, and I believe he's going to win.
The criminal charges follow a string of civil lawsuits, including a settlement with Combs's longtime girlfriend, singer Cassie. She can be seen in this 2016 surveillance video, being thrown to the ground and physically attacked by Combs. Prosecutors say Cassie was attempting to escape from one of Combs's freak-offs. Combs later apologizing for his actions caught on video. His attorney arguing Diddy's toxic relationship with Cassie was consensual.
This was a 10-year relationship. There's no coercion. There's no crime.
With 3 of Diddy's sons and other family members in court to support him, the 54-year-old appeared solemn as prosecutors argued against bail, saying he has a history of witness tampering, threats, and physical violence.
Now, none of his victims are named in that criminal indictment. However, as you mentioned in your piece, multiple people have filed civil suits. Are we hearing anything from those accusers in reaction?
So in the wake of his arrest and then now him being kept behind bars after this indictment was unsealed, we have heard from several of them through their attorneys saying that they feel a sense of relief. We're hearing them say that this is one step closer to justice and that they're not surprised. But again, we don't know if any of those civil accusers are actually part of this criminal indictment, if we'll see any of them take the stand at a potential trial. And so this is just something obviously that we're monitoring. And something that is interesting, though, is that big people in the music industry, we haven't really seen anybody come out and say anything on social media yet.
Fascinating. Thank you, Chloe Malas. Such a disturbing story. Welcome back. Today, the House is voting on a bill to fund the government for another 6 months, but this is not a done deal. Speaker Johnson pulled this same bill from the floor just last week after some conservatives defected. He has also linked this bill to legislation that would require proof of citizenship to register to vote, a move that likely makes the bill dead on arrival if it ever makes it to the Senate, adding the fact that President Biden has hinted at a veto, and what you have is a big mess with less than 2 weeks until the government shuts down. Joining us now from Capitol Hill is NBC's Julie Sirkin. Julie, does Speaker Johnson have the votes to get this bill through the House?
Well, Anna, that remains to be seen when the House takes it up later today. But even members of Johnson's leadership team don't expect that he will have the votes to get this across the finish line, to even get this bill and that election bill to the Senate, as you mentioned here. But Johnson, of course, trying this again. Remember, a couple of days ago, he was going to put this on the floor. He ended up pulling it. He spent the whole weekend on the phone, working the phones, trying to talk to his members to convince them to at least move this ahead so that then if this doesn't pass, they could put this in the Democrats' court. We've been talking all year how Johnson is operating with a very, very, very thin majority here. So he's almost certainly going to need Democrats in order for any bill to keep the government open to pass. That is because he has several members who will not vote for any bill, for any continuing resolution to fund the government, no matter what sweetener he puts on it. I want you to take a listen to the stark message we heard from the top Republican in the Senate just yesterday and his warning to Johnson.
My only observation about this whole discussion is the one thing you cannot have is a government shutdown. It would be politically beyond stupid for us to do that right before the election, because certainly we'd get the blame.
And look, Anna, Johnson knows this. Republicans know this. They've been through this before. I don't think even Johnson, who you see on your screen there holding a press conference, wants to have a shutdown. But of course, he's moving ahead with this bill. So the question is, will he get it through or will it fail? And will they have to turn to a bipartisan option? And Speaker Johnson speaking there. We will keep an eye on that monitor. Thank you, Julie Sirkin. So before the shutdown deadline, more fireworks expected on Capitol Hill next week. Senators are set to grill the CEO behind the popular weight loss drugs Ozempic and Wegovy. The CEO of Novo Nordisk has faced months of criticism from lawmakers over the high cost of these drugs. According to Senator Bernie Sanders, who chairs the Help Committee, a month's supply of Ozempic, get this, it costs almost $1,000 in the U.S. compared to $59 in Germany. And Senator Sanders is joining us now. Senator, great to have you here with us. We have talked about this issue before. There is a huge demand for these drugs, but it'll be really hard to pay for them, right? When you question the Novo Nordisk CEO, what answers will you be after?
Well, we basically want to know why he is charging the American people 10 or 15 times more for the same exact product that he's charging people in Europe, Canada, and elsewhere. And I think basically, he may say it or not, the answer is he can do it in the United States because he can get away with it. Other countries have strong laws. They negotiate prices. In America, historically, until very recently, drug companies could charge us any price they want. And in the case of Ozempic and Wegovy, we're dealing with the need to deal with epidemics in diabetes and obesity, costing us lives, costing us a lot of suffering, and huge amounts of money treating these illnesses. So you have a good drug. They have got to make this drug affordable for the American people so that we can begin to deal in an effective way with diabetes and obesity.
Novo Nordisk argues the net price of Ozempic after discounts and rebates has actually declined 40% since this drug was approved in 2017. What do you make of that argument that the prices have come down and they could fall even more?
Well, first of all, what they're talking about is, in some cases, after rebates from PBMs, charging $600. Number two, if you are uninsured or underinsured and you go to your pharmacy, you're going to pay the list price, which is close to $1,000. Number three, if you are on insurance and you get this for a reasonable price, the reason your insurance prices are going to be very, very high. So people can pay a reasonable price for the drug, but they're paying it at the other end in terms of high insurance rates. Also, I would add, these guys want to see Medicaid cover the product. They want to see Medicare cover the product. The estimate is that we would literally bankrupt Medicare, raise premiums to an unaffordable rate if we in the United States had to pay the prices that Novo Nordisk wants.
Affordability, accessibility to health care. This has been a huge focus of your work. So I have to ask you about the comments we heard from Donald Trump at the debate saying he saved Obamacare. Here's what he said.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan?
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now. But if we come up with something, I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have to do that. And you'll be hearing about it in the not too distant future.
So those comments, in addition to saying he saved Obamacare, what's your reaction to what he is saying?
It's really quite amazing, Anna. He has been in 3 political campaigns. He has been president for 4 years. We are in the midst of a very serious health care crisis. We spend twice as much per capita on health care as any other nation. 85 million Americans uninsured or underinsured. Our life expectancy is lower than many other countries. And after all of that time, he is working on a concept for a plan. And obviously, he did not save the Affordable Care Act. He worked his tail off as president to make sure that it would be defeated. We saved it by 1 vote, John McCain's vote.
I want to switch gears to the recent apparent assassination attempt. Trump took to social media after this incident to blame Vice President Harris's rhetoric about him, saying this, quote, because of this communist left rhetoric, the bullets are flying and it will only get worse. How do you see those comments and the current threat level?
look, I hope it goes without saying that everybody in America, no matter what your political point of view is, understands that violence of any shape or form is unacceptable in America. We have our disagreements. We don't express them violently. End of discussion. But, you know, it's funny coming from Trump, whose rhetoric has been the most ugly, I think, of any president or presidential candidate in history. I think what you just read me, he called Kamala Harris a communist. I mean, you know, that is so totally absurd. So here is this guy coming up with outrageous rhetoric, and then he blames other people for the violence. So I would suggest to Donald Trump, tone it down. Let's have a debate on issues. Let's have honest disagreements, but don't start calling people terrible names or suggesting that people are communists when, of course, they are not.
2 apparent assassination attempts already in this election cycle. I mean, it's just unheard of, right? Or almost unheard of. Right now, Congress is considering a boost of funding for the Secret Service. Would you support that?
Yes, I would. I think, look, again, it goes without saying. We want all of our candidates to be able to go out and campaign and be perfectly safe. And, of course, people who come to rallies to be safe as well.
I want to ask about government funding. We're less than 2 weeks away from a potential shutdown. As we just reported yesterday, your Republican colleague, Mitch McConnell, said it would be beyond stupid to shut down the government in an election year specifically. I know you and Senator McConnell don't always agree, to say the least, but do you agree on this?
Yeah, I think he was quite right. If the Republicans shut down the government, you know, a month before an election, it would be, I think, as McConnell indicated, political malfunction. You know, the truth of the matter is that what's going on in the House in general right now under Republican leadership is really quite crazy. I think people have called it the least effective Congress in modern American history. They do very little except make political attacks. Country faces serious problems. The American people, at the very least, do not want to see their government shut down. I hope that Speaker Johnson understands that.
Senator Bernie Sanders, thank you so much for your time, and we will be watching that hearing with Novo Nordisk CEO next week. Appreciate you getting out front on that issue. We're back with breaking news and new reports of wireless devices exploding in the users' hands in Lebanon today. This after that deadly coordinated attack yesterday. At least 12 people are dead and around 3,000 injured following yesterday's coordinated detonation of hundreds of pagers belonging to members of the militant group Hezbollah. Now, Hezbollah blaming Israel for the attack, and this morning, 2 U.S. officials confirmed to NBC News that Israel was behind it. Let's get right to NBC's Raf Sanchez joining us from Tel Aviv. Also with us, retired CIA officer and MSNBC security and intelligence analyst Mark Polymeropoulos. Raf, give us the latest on these new reports of more explosions.
So, Anna, in just the last couple of minutes, Lebanese state media is reporting what appears to be a second wave of explosions, both in Beirut, the capital of Lebanon, but also in other areas of the country, including the south near the Israeli border. Lebanese state media is saying that for a second day in a row, it is handheld communication devices that are exploding in people's hands, in their pockets, attached to their belts. It is not totally clear at this point whether this is more pagers that are exploding today or whether this is potentially radios, walkie-talkies. We don't have firm detail. But of course, this is just a startling new development a little over 24 hours after those thousands of pagers exploded all across Lebanon yesterday. Hezbollah calling it a massive Israeli covert attack. And while the Israeli government is refusing to say one way or another whether it was involved, 2 American officials tell NBC News that Israel was responsible. Now, the United States says it did not get any advanced warning of this attack, and it is still trying to gather information. But you can see on the left of your screen, that is one of many thousands of the explosions across Lebanon yesterday. Hezbollah members going about their day in the supermarket, walking down the street on the backs of motorcycles, when all of a sudden these pagers exploding. Now, the pagers in question appear to bear the logo of Apollo Gold. That is a Taiwanese technology company. But that company overnight is saying that the pagers in Lebanon were in fact produced by a company in Hungary that had paid a license fee to use its logo. Now, NBC News has contacted that Hungarian company. The woman identifying herself as a CEO says that company does not actually make pagers, that they are merely an intermediary. So what appears to be the case here is that at some point, Israeli operatives got into the supply chain of these pagers and planted small explosives before allowing them to be delivered into the hands of Hezbollah operatives in Lebanon. And viewers may be wondering, Anna, why is it that Hezbollah is using pagers, a technology from the 1980s, from the 1990s? And the answer is Hezbollah thought that it was more secure from Israeli electronic surveillance. They believed it was safer than using smartphones. And it turns out to have been a deadly mistake, with that massive chain of explosions ripping across Lebanon yesterday, and now what appears to be a second wave today.
Okay, Raph, we'll let you get with your reporting and bring us any new details as you learn them. In the meantime, Mark, 2 days in a row now. What do you make of it?
Well, it looks like they're still going, which is pretty extraordinary in the sense of that yesterday, Hezbollah and their operatives across the country, obviously were living in fear of these communication devices. The fact that that's still occurring is pretty remarkable. But Anna, this is really a stunning covert action operation. Israel is giving us a master class on this. And, in my experience with kinetic operations like this, I've never seen anything on this type of scale. The Israelis have done this before. They killed Yahya Ayash, a master Hamas bomb maker, in 1996 with an exploding cell phone. And of course, you've seen the Israelis conduct kinetic operations, these targeted high-value target operations in places like Lebanon and Iran, but not on something of this. This scale is massive. And as Raf noted, the supply side of this is really what is quite extraordinary, that they were able to, in essence, interdict and place explosives in thousands of devices. I mean, this is something that, in my old world of the intelligence community, is going to be seen as one of the really most remarkable intelligence operations in terms of kinetic operations that we've seen in the last decade.
According to the New York Times, in terms of how this all worked, the explosions yesterday, and officials were briefed on the operation, say Israel had hid these explosive materials in the pagers before they reached Lebanon. The explosive material was placed next to the battery of each pager with a remote switch. And then at 3:30 p.m., the pagers received a message appearing to come from Hezbollah leadership, which activated the explosives. From this description, does this sound like a sophisticated attack?
So the technology is certainly there to do this if you actually can get a hold of the device. So you place a small amount of explosives in the device, and then they detonate it via a page. That's not something that, to me, was all that sophisticated. What is really remarkable is how they get the actual, the 1,000 pagers, that they're able to do this, that they're able to, get into the procurement network. And so it's the scale of this and the ability. And look, Lebanon's a denied area. This is a really tough operating environment. And the fact that they were able to do this and to, in essence, kind of, break this this kind of security aura that Hezbollah had. I mean, Hezbollah is reeling right now. Their members are terrified. Everyone's head is on a swivel. They are living in fear. And that's certainly one of the goals of this Israeli operation, is to restore that deterrence capability, which they, in fact, lost after October 7th.
Again, 12 people at least are dead from yesterday's explosions. We're still obviously awaiting news on today's latest round of explosions. At least 3,000 people are injured, 200 in critical condition. What kind of impact does it have on Hezbollah's ability to operate and to potentially attack Israel?
Anna, this is a tremendous question, because right now Hezbollah is paralyzed. They have hundreds, if not 1,000 of their operatives who are maimed. Some are dead, but they're taken off the battlefield. You also have what's going to be an absolute counterintelligence witch hunt inside Hezbollah. They were paralyzed themselves in terms of trying to find out, how this security broke down. And the final piece is they have a communications infrastructure that has been compromised by Israel. And if the reports are true that more communications devices are exploding today, it almost renders them, inoperable on the battlefield. And I think this is a strong message the Israelis are sending them. In essence, the Israelis escalated to de-escalate, telling the Hezbollah leadership, you do not want a wider war. We know where you sleep. We know everything about you. And this is going to resonate within the rank and file. They will be angry about this, but they're paralyzed right now.
Welcome back. This morning, the Princess of Wales made her highly anticipated return to royal duties. Days after Princess Kate announced she had finished with chemo treatments, she is now officially back to work. NBC's Kelly Kobiea has the details. Kelly.
Princess Kate is one of the most popular, if not the most popular member of the British royal family, and the public has been eager to see her back out in public shaking hands again. And while she's still focused primarily on her recovery, this private meeting marks a big step toward her comeback.
Princess Kate returning to royal duties 9 months after her cancer diagnosis. The future queen meeting with her royal foundation at Windsor Castle on Tuesday as she slowly gets back to work.
My path to healing and full recovery is long, and I must continue to take each day as it comes. I am, however, looking forward to being back at work and undertaking a few more public engagements in the coming months when I can.
Just last week, the Princess of Wales announced in an emotional message that she had completed her chemotherapy treatment.
Doing what I can to stay cancer-free is now my focus.
The deeply personal video also providing a never-before-seen glimpse into her private life with Prince William and their 3 children. Kate speaking candidly about just how tough this time has been.
The cancer journey is complex, scary, and unpredictable for everyone, especially those closest to you.
The 42-year-old royal revealed her diagnosis in March, just weeks after her father-in-law, King Charles, announced his own cancer battle. She was not seen in public until June to celebrate the king's birthday and appeared at Wimbledon in July, cheered on by an adoring crowd. This week, a more private engagement. According to the court circular, the official record of the royal family, she took part in a meeting for her Early Years campaign, which focuses on the importance of early childhood, a cause that has become a large part of her life's work.
We know that her early years work is the thing she treasures most professionally. So I think it's very significant and appropriate that her first foray back into working life in a real sense has been to do this meeting.
And her fans are very happy to see that she's back at work, but everyone's asking, when will she be out making public appearances again? Kensington Palace hasn't confirmed any dates yet, but there are 2 dates coming up where she's likely to attend if she's feeling up to it. One is the Remembrance Day service in November. That's for members of the military and veterans. It's a big event here in the UK. And the second is her carol service in December. It's something that she has spearheaded and is very proud of and would like to attend, again, if she's up to it.
Kelly Kobiea, thank you.